What if everything you believe about your life is wrong? Not slightly inaccurate, not partially incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. What if the story you've been telling yourself about who you are, about why you are here, about why things happened the way they did? What if that story was written during your most wounded moments? Pause. What if the version of you that wakes up every morning is not the real you, but the adjusted you, the defended you, the survival you? What if you are not lost? What if you were distracted? Distracted by pain, distracted by expectations, distracted by comparison, distracted by noise, distracted by the need to prove something. Because somewhere along the journey, you stopped being who you were and started becoming who you thought you had to be. And you did it slowly, so slowly, you didn't even notice. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before your first mistake, before your first insecurity, before your first heartbreak, before anyone called you by the wrong name, you were known, fully, intentionally, completely." So tell me, how does someone who was known before they existed become lost? You cannot lose something God never misplaced. You can only become distracted from it, and distraction is subtle. It doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like survival. It feels like adaptation. It feels like maturity. It feels like this is just how life works. But the truth is, the world slowly trained you to disconnect from yourself. As a child, you were certain. You dreamed without permission. You spoke without filtering. You imagined without fear. You did not question your worth. Then life happened. Someone laughed. Someone rejected. Someone compared. Someone left. Someone disappointed you. Someone told you to be realistic. And without realizing it, you started editing yourself. You started shrinking. You started negotiating your authenticity for acceptance. And that was the first distraction. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Conformed, shaped, molded, adjusted. You were shaped to fit systems that were never designed for your spirit. So you adapted. You learned how to survive rooms instead of transform them. You learned how to stay quiet instead of stay true. You learned how to perform instead of exist. And after years of performing, you got tired and you called that feeling being lost. But exhaustion is not evidence of being lost. It is evidence of being misaligned. There is a difference. Being lost means there is no path. Being distracted means you stopped walking your path and started walking someone else's. Let that sit. How many of your goals are truly yours? How many of your fears were inherited? How many of your limits were taught? When was the last time you sat in silence? Without music, without your phone, without someone else's voice filling your mind? Because distraction is not just activity. Distraction is noise, and noise is addictive. It keeps you from hearing the uncomfortable truth. You have been living as a reduced version of yourself. Not because you are weak, but because you were trying to survive. But survival is not purpose. John 10:10 says, I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. Abundant life does not mean busy life. It does not mean impressive life. It means aligned life, a live life, intentional life. And if you feel numb, if you feel disconnected, if you feel like you are moving but not arriving, you are not lost. You are distracted. Distracted from your essence, distracted from the voice that used to guide you, distracted from the courage you once had. And here is the dangerous part. Distraction feels normal after a while. You begin to defend it. You say, this is just adulthood. This is responsibility. This is reality. But deep inside, there is a quiet voice saying, this is not who you were meant to be. And that voice is not guilt. It is remembrance. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, He has set eternity in the human heart. Eternity, meaning there is something inside you that does not agree with limitation. There is something inside you that refuses to settle. There is something inside you that knows this life is bigger than the version you are currently living. And that tension you feel, that restlessness, that quiet dissatisfaction, it is not confusion, it is awakening. Because the moment you begin to question your current identity is the moment distraction begins to lose power. Let me ask you something honestly. If no one expected anything from you, if you were not afraid of failing, if you were not afraid of being misunderstood, if money was not a concern, if comparison did not exist, who would you be? Don't answer quickly, sit with it. Because somewhere in that answer is the version of you that never left. You were never lost. You were layered, covered, conditioned, muted, but not erased. God does not erase design. He waits for return. And return does not begin with running. It begins with awareness. Right now, as you are listening, something is shifting. You are beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, the problem was never your ability, it was your attention. And whatever controls your attention, controls your direction. So this is not a motivational video. This is an interruption to autopilot, an interruption to inherited identity, an interruption to the lie that you are behind. You are not behind, you are misdirected. And the beautiful thing about misdirection is that it can be corrected. But first, you must admit something radical. I was never lost. I was distracted. And distraction ends the moment awareness begins. Pause. Breathe. We are just getting started. There was a day you started forgetting yourself. You don't remember the exact date. It wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement, no warning, just a subtle shift. A moment where you realized being fully yourself had consequences. Maybe it was the day they laughed at your idea. Maybe it was the day your vulnerability was used against you. Maybe it was the day you were compared to someone else. Why can't you be more like them? And something inside you adjusted, not loudly, quietly. You began observing instead of expressing. You began calculating instead of trusting. You began performing instead of being. And that was the day distraction began. Because distraction does not start with chaos. It starts with self-protection. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." But somewhere along the way, you didn't just guard your heart, you hid it. You locked it behind versions of yourself that felt safer. Safer to be agreeable, safer to be impressive, safer to be invisible. And each time you chose safety over authenticity, you moved 1 inch further away from your essence. It didn't feel wrong, it felt necessary. But necessity built a mask, and over time, the mask felt natural. You adapted so well that you forgot you were adapting. You became responsible, dependable, logical, strong. But beneath all that strength was exhaustion, because pretending is heavy, even when the pretending is subtle. Let me ask you something quietly. When was the last time you felt fully expressed? Not filtered, not strategic, not curated, fully expressed. Most people cannot answer that, because adulthood slowly teaches us that expression must be optimized. Your emotions must be managed. Your dreams must be realistic. Your ambition must be measurable. Your faith must be explainable. And slowly, you started shrinking the parts of you that felt too much, too emotional, too visionary, too spiritual, too different, too sensitive, too bold. But what if those were not weaknesses? What if those were clues? In Psalm 139:13 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." Your inmost being, not your edited version, not your socially acceptable version. Your inmost being, that means the core of you, was intentional. Your sensitivity was intentional. Your imagination was intentional. Your spiritual curiosity was intentional. But when the world did not celebrate those parts, you misinterpreted them. You thought, "This must be wrong." So you suppressed it, and suppression became distraction. Not distraction through chaos, but distraction through compromise. Small compromises. Choosing practicality over calling. Choosing approval over conviction. Choosing predictability over faith. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles." Notice the wording, everything that hinders, not just sin, anything that slows your alignment, anything that clouds your clarity, anything that entangles your focus. Distraction is not always sinful. Sometimes it is simply misaligned. You didn't wake up and choose to abandon your purpose. You chose comfort. You chose certainty. You chose what seemed safe, and safety slowly replaced surrender. But here is the dangerous part. The more you live disconnected from your essence, the more successful you can appear. You can build a life that impresses everyone and still feel like something is missing. Why? Because success cannot replace identity. It can only decorate it. You know that feeling. When you achieve something and the satisfaction fades quickly, when you reach a milestone and instead of peace, you feel pressure. When you accomplish what you once prayed for, but it does not feel like home, that is not ingratitude. That is misalignment. Because your soul does not measure life by applause, it measures life by alignment. Jesus asked in Mark 8:36, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul?" Forfeit, meaning lose connection, not physically lose, but disconnect from. You can gain influence and lose yourself, gain recognition and lose peace, gain status and lose direction, and then one day you wake up and say, "I feel lost." But you were not lost. You were layered with expectations, layered with fear, layered with roles, layered with responsibilities, layered with other people's definitions. And beneath all those layers is still the original you, waiting, not angry, not gone, waiting. Luke 15 tells the story of the prodigal son. He left home. He pursued distraction. He chased pleasure. He chased independence. And when everything collapsed, Scripture says something powerful. It says, he came to himself. He came to himself. Not he found a new identity. Not he reinvented himself. He came back to himself. That means the real version never disappeared. It was simply buried beneath distraction. And maybe that is where you are. Not broken, buried, not confused, covered, not incapable, distracted. So let me ask you gently, what parts of you did you abandon to survive? What dreams did you label unrealistic because someone else could not see them? What convictions did you silence because you were afraid of standing alone? What spiritual sensitivity did you suppress because it did not fit your environment? Be honest. This is not condemnation. This is excavation. You cannot return to yourself if you refuse to admit where you left. And maybe the day you started forgetting yourself was the day you started seeking validation. And validation is a dangerous substitute for identity because it depends on others. Identity depends on alignment. Galatians 1:10 says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? If you live for approval, you will constantly edit yourself, and editing yourself eventually erases you." But here is the hope. Forgetting yourself is not permanent. It is reversible because the original design is still within you. Ecclesiastes 3:11 reminds us again, he has set eternity in the human heart. You feel restless because eternity does not fit inside distraction. You feel tension because purpose does not settle for performance. You feel discomfort because your soul knows you are capable of more. That discomfort is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of awareness returning. You are remembering slowly, and remembering is the first step home. So breathe. You are not late. You are awakening. And awakening always feels disorienting at first because the illusion starts breaking. And the moment illusion breaks, clarity begins. You were never lost. You just forgot yourself. And forgetting is not the end of the story. Remembering is. Pause. Let that settle. We are going deeper next. Right now, pause. If this awakens something in you, don't just feel it, act on it. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for alignment. Comment, "I am returning." Because this is not just content, This is remembrance, and remembrance is the beginning of home.